Morning. Sorry. Good morning. Uh, First off, happy Mother's Day. I've been very fortunate to have a lot of great mothers in my life, my mom specifically, and then grandparents. I gained a mother-in-law recently, and very, very recently, I am living with a new mom now. My wife Dana, of course. I had to throw in one picture. We caught him finally smiling on a good moment here, kind of a happy time here. This is just to kind of, if he starts crying, remember he is happy sometimes. I promise, promise. But this is a very special Mother's Day for me because it's different. It's new for me. So, of course, this morning I want to talk about mothers. I feel like I would have been slapped at home if I didn't do this. So we're going to talk about some mothers throughout the Bible. Now, just want to give some caveats. I can't talk about all of them, obviously, because you guys want to go home quickly, and I understand. And if I did miss a mom that you cared about in the Bible, sorry to yell at me later. I apologize. I had to pick some of them. I want to look at verses over in Proverbs chapter 31, 26 to 29. There it says, "She speaks with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue. She watches over the affairs of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children arise and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her. Many women do noble things, but you surpass them all." And before I thought I understood what these verses mean, but now it's taken on a brand new meaning because I didn't know that a small 2 month and some change old would make you so not idle. I thought that it'd be easy for a while. I was drastically wrong, and my wife does incredible things all the time, and she's doing things all over the place. And so I'm very thankful. She's mainly the only reason we have a sermon today, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to get it together. But this morning, I want to take a look at just these five mothers, starting with Eve, Sarah, Jochebed, Hannah, and Mary. Once again, a lot of these, I just picked them. I'm sorry. I know there's other moms in there too. Of course, I overlooked some maybe big ones. You're like, why didn't you put in Naomi and Ruth? Sorry, didn't have time to get all these things in there. Sorry, these are the ones that are in there. And also, Scripture doesn't really go into them like mothering their children too much. So we're going to look at the characteristics of the mothers themselves and things that they did. And I have like kind of one key takeaway from each one. Now, is it the only takeaway you can take? No. Is it the best one? Probably not even that. Is it the one that I identified and think that I'm talking to? Yeah. So that's kind of where we're coming from. Um, Sorry if I didn't do some of them justice. I'm doing my best here. Okay, so we're starting with Eve. So back in Genesis chapter 3 and verse 20, it says that Adam named his wife Eve because she would become the mother of all the living. Because you're probably thinking like, why throw Eve on there? I've only heard some pretty negative things. She's the first mom. She was the start of it all. I feel like it'd be a mistake to leave her off the list, in my opinion. But then we jump back to chapter 3 verse 3 and verse 6 in Genesis. And there it says, "But God did say, you must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it or you will die." And then drop down to verse 6, it says, "When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it." Now, I'm skipping some critical verses there where she was tempted. She didn't just go out and decide to break the rule immediately, but she knew, I want to outline that she knew what the rule was, but she saw that it was pleasing to the eye and desirable for gaining wisdom. Not gonna lie, I'd probably tried the fruit. If those were the things that I saw of it, even though that's like the one rule you had, I probably would have been tempted as well. So I think she gets a bad rap for this, but based on this decision that was made, and because Adam also partook, some things happened here. In verses 16 to 17, it says, "The woman he said, I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. With painful labor, you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you." And to Adam, he said, "Because you listened to your wife and ate fruit from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat from it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil, you will eat food from it all the days of your life." So, obviously, the consequences of her breaking those rules, both of them breaking the rules, led to some consequences we're dealing with even today. It just kind of cascaded all from the starting point. And so, in recap here, Eve is the mother of all the living. She's kind of the first mom that existed there. And a point of note, she didn't have a mom to teach her things either. Now, I don't want to diminish God and what he did. Okay, I'm not talking about that, but she didn't have a physical mother there. And mothers are hugely critical for upbringing and kind of directing and steering kind of how you do things in life. Second, she knew the rules and broke them, and then had to face the punishment of that decision. And so the main takeaway from Eve that I want to talk about is that our actions have consequences. I know that's pretty obvious, but it's taken on a full new meaning for me now, especially with a little one at home, because, you know, choices that I made before in the past just affected me and me alone. Then when I got married, then me and my wife sometimes, but usually it was still just me. Like if I did something not smart, I usually pay it was usually I'd sign up for a race, not be healthy enough for it, and then get hurt, and then I would be suffering, just me, right? But now, like if I get hurt, that means I can't care for a child, and it's a big ripple now. My consequences don't only affect just me; they affect other people in my lives, and especially with mothers, it affects their children in a big, big way because mothers play a ginormous role in raising their children. I've seen it from all sorts of moms everywhere. I know all the things you do. I see it, and I much more appreciate it now that that I'm living with a mom. You know, so it's taken on a new meaning. But just remember that our actions have consequences. Second up is Sarah here over in Genesis chapter 13, in the end of verse 14 to 17. There it says, "Look around from where you are to the north and south, to the east and west. All the land that you see, I will give to you and your offspring forever. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust, then your offspring could be counted. Go walk the length and breadth of the land, for I am giving it to you." And you're probably thinking, well, Jordan, this was actually made to Abram here and Abraham. Yeah. So he was going to become the father of all these nations, but that means that Sarah is going to be the mother of all of those nations too. And so her role was just as big, if not bigger. I don't know. She had a big role to play in this as well. So then we look over in Genesis chapter 18, verses 10 to 12. There it says, "Then one of them said, I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, will have a son. Now Sarah was listening at the entrance to the tent, which was behind him. Abraham and Sarah were already very old, and Sarah was past the age of childbearing. So Sarah laughed to herself as she thought, after I am worn out and my Lord is old, will I now have this pleasure?" And so this is kind of a recurring problem in Old Testament times and with Old Testament characters, especially that are looked at. They were struggling to have a child, and they're like, "You're going to have this." They were promised this giant nation was going to come from them. They're like, "Well, we don't have any kids. We don't have any children. I don't think that's possible." And she even started laughing about it. Understandable. I would laugh about it as well if I was in her situation. And she's like, "There's no way. I thanks. I that would be awesome. That would be great. That would be wonderful. I don't see how it's possible. I don't think that I can do this given my age." And, you know, we see what happens here. So over in Genesis 18, verse 14, it says, "Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son." And then over in chapter 21 and verse 2, it says, "Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age, at the very time God had promised him." And so we see that the promise was ultimately fulfilled. Now, did that astound Sarah? Probably. It was pretty miraculous that she was able to do that. But it was just like the Lord said. And there was nothing that was too hard for the Lord to accomplish here. So, uh, first up, she would be the mother of many nations. Kind of like Eve, just kind of a later version here. She's going to be the mother of all of these people there. They're the Israel, the whole country, of all the tribes and things, right here. This is the starting point. This is where they all kind of came from. And she thought that her time had passed. She thought that I can't do this. It's not possible. She did try to take things into her own hands, use handmaiden to try to like kind of well, at least like if she has it, then I can claim it as mine. And she tried to take things into her own hands. Totally understandable. Once again, I would have tried to do exactly the same thing in that situation. But God did ultimately fulfill his promise and bless them with a child. And so a big key takeaway from Sarah is that nothing is too hard for the Lord. Now, that doesn't mean that you won't have to put in any effort. It's not like an easy button and God will just kind of come down and drop off the new car in your lot. He doesn't do things like that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying God is going to magically take care of all of your problems. I am saying that nothing is too hard for him. Do not limit God. Let him work in your life. That may require you using the skills and the knowledge and the attributes and talents that he blessed you with to accomplish things. But all of those things stem from God. Nothing is too hard for him. So just keep that in mind. Next up is Jochebed. And maybe you don't know who Jochebed is. This was his mom. So over in Exodus chapter 1, verse 22, it says, Then Pharaoh gave this order to all his people: every Hebrew boy that is born you must throw into the Nile, but let every girl live. Rough start. That's a terrible decree. And if you're living in that land, it's like, ugh, this is puts me in a tight spot here, because it's like the ruling body, the big bad country that they run everything, and they're like, this is the decree. You have to do this. Well, she had a boy, and so over in Exodus chapter 2, verses 2 and 3, it says, and she, that's Jochebed, and we can see her name actually over in Exodus chapter 6 and verse 20. She's really not named until then, so it's kind of this is where you find it. But um, she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. But when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. Then she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. And what I find most astounding now, especially having just a 2 month old, that she was able to hide a child for 3 months. I'm very confident I could not hide Edwin for 3 minutes. There's no way that I could actually do that. I just couldn't. I just couldn't. So first off, that's just astounding to me that she was able to pull that off in this country that was going after him, especially. Um, but she was like, I got to take care of this child. I want to take care of this child. And then she had the faith that was like, well, I've done all that I can do, and kind of put the child in God's hands, if you will. Just put him in this little ark, if you will, and just kind of floated him along. That wasn't the end of her story with him, though. So dropping down to verses 7 to 10, it says, then this Moses' sister, asked Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you? Because Pharaoh's daughter had found this basket and was like, oh, there's this child in here. Like, let me take care of him. And the sister was kind of following along, was like, hey, I can find a Hebrew nurse to kind of nurse him to health here. Like, you want me to get one of the slaves to take care of him? It's like, okay, yes, go, she answered. So the girl went and got the baby's mother. So Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you. So the woman took the baby and nursed him. So not only did Jochebed still get to kind of raise him until he could be nursed, which they say is around 2 years, is what they say, something around that. At least she was able to be in his life in the very beginning. She also got paid for it, which I think is kind of cool. Just like got paid to be the mom for your child, which is that'd be super nice if that could happen. If parents get paid somewhere, I'd love to sign up for that. But um, she was able to actually be an influence there, and I think this is just me speculating here, but he has like deep ties to his heritage as he grows up. I don't think that came from nowhere, and mothers have this huge way of impacting things on their children. And during those first 2 years, children are just like sponges and they absorb everything. They pay attention even when you don't think they are, and you say a throwaway phrase that is not necessarily bad, but kind of annoying when repeated to you numerous times. And they suck it all in. And I have a feeling that Jochebed gave him this kind of like strong tie to his heritage, because then he came back later and was a huge character in Old Testament times and led the people in arguably the biggest way possible. I liken him to like the Jesus of Old Testament. Once again, this is just my opinion, but he led the people to the promised land. I don't think you can get a better example from the Old Testament. So Jochebed, the Hebrew baby boys had to be killed. She had one. She's like, I don't like this plan. I'm gonna hide Moses. I'm gonna keep him for 3 months. Once again, an incredible feat, in my opinion, and saved him there. And then she still got to nurse and raise him and be a part of his life. I want to say that that was a little blessing that God gave her. That's once again just my opinion on these things. You take that or leave it, but I think it was really special that she got to be part of his kind of weaning period there. And so the key takeaway here is to have the courage to protect your children no matter the obstacles. I think that I don't think this would ever happen today, so I don't think making an analogy is very good. But being in a country of that power, at least not in this country. I don't want to speak for other countries in the world, but uh, I'm struggling to find like an analogy that would even kind of relate to this. But it's just like if government mandate came down, it's like you have to do this, and she was able to defy that. I think that's incredible courage, because that probably not only put her at risk, but her whole family and everybody. Because back in that time, like if somebody messed up, it was kind of like, let's just cut that branch off the tree. Let's just everybody, their descendant, they're gone. Like we don't want to deal with any of that. That's the time that she lived in. She was able to kind of defy their mandate. So I think that's incredible. Moving on to Hannah over in First Samuel chapter 1, verses 2 and 6. There says, he, that's Elkanah, had two wives. One was called Hannah and the other Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah had none. And dropping down to verse 6, it says, because the Lord had closed Hannah's womb, her rival kept provoking her in order to irritate her. So here we see that Elkanah had these two wives, and Hannah was barren. Once again, this is kind of a recurring problem, but Peninnah here is like giving it to her. She's provoking her to irritate her. And that's just not okay. That's not okay. I hate to see that happen because there's a lot of people that even today we know are struggling that way. And like to just jab at them, that's just terrible. And so Hannah's extremely distraught in this case, especially back then. It was all about like the lineage you had and things. And if you couldn't produce heirs, you were not good. And fortunately, Elkanah was actually extremely kind to her. He was from what scriptures say, a pretty decent husband. It's not about him. I just wanted to throw that in that like she wasn't just left high and dry, just on her own, like always crying. It's like, well, tough luck. That's not how her husband treated her, thankfully. That still didn't help her situation though, because she was still unfortunately without child. And so, dropping down to verses 10 and 11, 1 Samuel 1, it says, in her deep anguish, Hannah prayed to the Lord, weeping bitterly. And she made a vow, saying, Lord Almighty, if you will only look on your servant's misery and remember me, and not forget your servant, but give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord for all the days of his life, and no razor will ever be used on his head. So here we see the earnestness of which she wanted a child. She came to the Lord, she prostrated himself before the Lord, was like, with supplication, came to the Lord, was like, please, I'll do anything. And she even did it in a way, and she wasn't like screaming out there. She wasn't trying to draw attention to herself. She actually kind of said it within herself, like in her head, but she would kind of like mime the words with her mouth. And one of the priests there, the prophet at the time, Eli, saw her and was like, "This lady's drunk. Get her out of this place. Like she doesn't belong here. She's doing this thing." She's like, "No, no, no. I haven't had anything to drink. I'm I'm just praying to the Lord fervently here." And she just is doing it to herself. She's doing it internally. She knows that God can help her. Unfortunately, we drop down to verses 27 and 28, and this is kind of what she's most famously quoted for. It says, I prayed for this child, and the Lord has granted me what I asked of him. So now I give him to the Lord. For his whole life, he will be given over to the Lord, and he worshiped the Lord there. So this was Samuel. This child was Samuel. Samuel went on to do incredible things in the Old Testament. He was an incredible prophet. He identified kings for the people when they asked for him. Not that he was a big fan of that, but that's what people wanted. He was a great ruling person in Old Testament times. And it all came from Hannah. Hannah having this ferocious attitude and this ability to just kind of pray fervently to the Lord and put all of her faith and trust in the Lord. So Hannah, she was childless and was provoked for it. She was kind of irritated and annoyed by Peninnah. But she still earnestly prayed for a child. She put herself down there and went to the Lord. And she kept her promise. I think that's, in my opinion, one of the most interesting parts about her story because if you have a child and you finally get it after all this time, I'd hang on to that child for dear life. There would be nothing you could do to take him away. But she was so willing to kind of surrender to the Lord and just put all her faith in him. And that's the big takeaway here is that supplication is surrender to God. This willingness to go to God in prayer whenever she was in need and to have that full surrender of both her and her child. And as a parent, like that's the best thing we can do for our children. Like leave and put them into the care of God. Like leave it to God. Like put them all in there. And it's tough to do because you're going to be pulled in a million different directions by people in society today. You're going to be pulled in. People are going to tell you all sorts of different things on how to raise a child, how to live, how to do all of these things. But she was willing to look to God. Now, once again, this doesn't mean that you don't do anything, but like God will change the diaper. No, that's not how it works. That's not what I'm suggesting. I'm just saying that the way that you lead them and grow them and like train them up, like look to the Lord to do that. And finally, Mary, over in Luke chapter 1, verses 30 to 33, it says, but the angel said to her, do not be afraid, Mary. You have found favor with God. You will conceive and give birth to a son, and you are to call him Jesus. He will be great and will be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord God will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over Jacob's descendants forever. His kingdom will never end. So that's a lot of pressure to put on somebody if you're like, hey, by the way, your first child's going to be the Son of the Most High. It's like, well, first off, I have numerous questions. One being, I'm a virgin. That seems a little awkward. Like, I don't understand how that's going to work. And I think that's just a crazy thing to ask anybody. I would be like, what if I passed? Could we perhaps go to the second in line? Is there somebody else who could take this responsibility on? But we see her answer down in verse 38, and it says, I am the Lord's servant, Mary answered. May your word to me be fulfilled. And then the angel left her. So she willingly, humbly kind of accepted this role that she was about to play. And I think that is super impressive because how often do you get tasked with something you're like, ugh, I don't want to do that. Sounds too hard. Sounds doesn't sound like fun. Doesn't sound like something I'm interested in really. Can I do something else perhaps to serve? Is that okay? She just accepted it. She was willing to take on whatever that meant. Then we see here at the end of Jesus' life, over in John chapter 19, verses 26 and 27, there it says, when Jesus saw his mother there and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to her, Woman, here is your son. And the disciple, here is your mother. From that time on, this disciple took her into his home. And so this is very interesting because this is when he's hanging on the cross. This is done. This is the one time, arguably, where Jesus could probably be like, I don't have to care about other people right now because I'm going through something incredibly difficult and hard. This is the one time he could probably be a little selfish, but he wasn't still. He looked out, and Mary was still there with him. Mary didn't just like have him was like, well, he's the son of the Most High. He'll probably be fine in life. Good luck. She still was around there. And some may think like, well, he didn't call her mom here. He's like woman. That's more of like a I was thinking like sir or madam today. I think he was trying to be respectful first off. And second, can you imagine already the pain that she's feeling when her child's there dying, arguably the most gruesome death imagined. Can you imagine him being like, Mom, oh, that this gotta tear that would tear her up. So I think he honestly was doing a kindness here of just like, hey, and he also wanted her to be taken care of. I was like, John, you got her, okay? Like, I can't do it. I can't help. Take her. And once again, we see in other places, Jesus wasn't like a millionaire or anything, so he didn't have the crazy means to be like, yeah, just live in my mansion, Mom. It'll be cool. He didn't have that, but he's like, I do have people that follow me, and like, take care of her. Okay. So it shows an incredible care for his earthly mother there. So Mary was given an important responsibility, arguably the most important that this happened, and she humbly accepted her role. She she didn't complain about it. She just took it on, and she was with him until the end. She stuck around the whole time. And so the key takeaway here is that God has a plan for us and our children. It may not be the plan that we want. It may not be the role that we were hoping for, but He's got a plan for us, and just trust in that plan. So in conclusion, once again, there are many more mothers in the Bible. I didn't get to all of them, obviously, but tried to cover the ones that I could and get some key takeaways. So, Eve taught us that our actions have consequences. Sarah, nothing is too hard for the Lord. Jochebed, we have to have the courage to protect our children no matter the obstacles. Hannah, we need to approach God with supplication and surrender to Him. And finally, Mary, God has a plan for us and our children. Trust in that plan. And speaking of a plan to to kind of get to salvation, to get to spend eternity with God, he's set up this plan for us. There's God's part that He has already done, and then there's our part. We have to hear, believe, repent, confess, be baptized, and then remain faithful in the end. So if anyone is along that path or would like to um, start that journey, be baptized, we would love to assist you with that. If you're struggling along your path, you're in some way and would like to talk about it with me or with someone else here, please do that. Talk to somebody before you go. Don't leave here feeling strange or conflicted. I promise you, someone here can help you. I would love to. And if you don't want to do it in front of everybody, I know that's a typical thing, just do it after. That's totally fine. Doesn't matter when. Just don't leave here without talking to somebody because we care about you. So if you have any needs, please come forward as we stand and sing the invitation song.